So I put an introduction slide on just in case anybody hadn't met me before. And I have a script, so you've got to put up with it. Good afternoon, my name is Rosemary Corkwell. Some of you may know me. I've been about for a couple of years, ever since I got my diagnosis in May 2018. In order to get my diagnosis, I had to have an almighty mental health crisis, which was actually caused by the job I was doing at the time. So barely relevant. But I don't recommend that. That's not fun. I work as the research assistant for the Faraway CIC, which makes use of some of my skills. I have a background in the sciences and creative writing, and read constantly when I'm not crocheting, embroidery, writing stuff, sleeping. Turns out being a bibliophile has a use, since I started collecting books about being autistic about as soon as I got my diagnosis. My need to find out all things has worked out well, since I now apply the information and resources I've mined to my job. One of the aims of the Faraway CIC is to improve the lives of local autistic adults. I would say that's the aim, but okay. This year has been an annus horribilis if ever I saw one, and autistic and other disabled people have really borne the brunt of it. My first project with the CIC was a survey of local autistic adults about their employment situation and how COVID-19 has affected that, of which more later. I currently have two other projects running: the Spectrum Online, formerly the Digital Isolation Project, aimed at helping people who have limited or no access to the internet gain access, which Jane told you all about earlier. And we have, but if you missed it, if you go to the website, there's the projects tab, and it's Spectrum Online under there. But you'll also see a couple of other projects in that tab: the writing group and the mentoring program, which I recommend both. I'm currently doing right on part of the writing group, just for, you know, a laugh, change of scene, someone to kick me up the arse when I stop writing. The adult autism service team are also helping with the Spectrum Online project by asking people when they're diagnosed if they've got access to the internet and need help with anything. And I had planned that once this current round of restrictions lift, we'll be distributing leaflets so people who don't have any contact with the service currently can find out about it. However, we've been put into tier 3, so I don't know what sort of freedom we're going to have to be able to do that. That's going to be fun. But if you represent a service and think this could help your clients, please share. The second project I'm running at the minute is to find out exactly what the CIC what people want from the CIC in terms of interest groups. There are several possible groups that we're able to set up, or we might be able to direct people into the direction of currently available services. It is a Google Forms, and if you want to take that down, if you don't already have it, or email info@thefarawaycic.org and somebody will email you back with a link. What I have noticed from my from looking at it recently is of the results so far is a lot of demand for employment support and arts and crafts. Makes it quite a good thing that we have an employment group, and we're starting an arts and craft group next week then, so that's good. Right, now I want to talk about the employment survey I did during the summer. In Dunedin Booth's Autism Equality in the Workplace, we learned that only 15% of autistic adults are in full-time employment. While full-time is the goal for society and you get judged by ability to do so, not every autistic person can manage full-time. Personally, I found working part-time much more manageable if I want to be able to look after myself too. I found it very hard to cook, wash and clean if I haven't got any energy. because I've spent all my energy attempting to work. However, the stat is a good stand-in for what we really need to know. How many autistic people are working? In the employment survey that I undertook during the summer, 27 people told me about their employment experiences. I was able to get people from a variety of genders, age, and employment status to fill in my survey, and I'm very grateful to them for their time. And I know some of them are here, although don't worry, nobody knows who you are except me, because I'm the one with all the data. 33% or 9 of my respondents were in employment of some form, whether that's full-time, part-time, employed, or self-employed. While various stats are given about the full-time employment of autistic people, depending on who you ask, and the size of the survey, Virginia Bruce quotes 15% compared with 31% of all disabled adults and 57% of non-disabled adults. I find it pretty grim because we do have the skills, we just don't seem to have anybody wanting to employ us, which seems strange. I think it's best if we start by looking at the factors, the local and national conditions affecting employment figures in the general population as well as the autistic population. North East Lincolnshire has a greater percentage of people in workless households in the region or the country. Educational attainment is lower than in the region or the country, and employment is mainly in manufacturing, retail, and human health and social work. And I got that data from an ONS website. There is references at the end of the slides if people want to check. Right. Now, I've done jobs in most of those sectors. 7 years in a factory was not fun. Retail, not fun either. Working telephones at the DWP, not fun either. Quick way to get me to have a mental health crisis, put me in a call centre. They're very loud, very bright, cliquey sorts of environments, or the jobs are boring and low paid, and there's no fulfillment in any of it. So, I mean, it's just not good for your brain, any brain, but like especially autistic brains that are hypersensitive to some sensory input or other. A recent report by the Institute of Leadership and Management, Workplace Diversity, The Power of Difference, showed that one in 4 employers said they would not employ an autistic person, and half said they wouldn't employ people with any form of neurodivergence. These are the figures for employers who are willing to admit that they would discriminate against neurodivergent people. How many won't admit to it but would still discriminate? They're excluding about 15% of the population. Is it really any wonder that autistic people struggle to find employment when they already have? When you can already discount quarter of the companies that you might want to work for. Given the local conditions and the attitudes of employers to neurodivergent employees, what I found in my research isn't unexpected, and actually a lot of it's been covered by different people today already, but you know, I'll still tell you about it. People have to decide whether they disclose during application and take the risk of being dismissed out of hand, even though some places, I believe, have a policy of disabled people have to have an interview, or they don't admit to it, they don't disclose, but then they struggle to get the reasonable accommodations, and they get bullied or sacked for not doing their job properly because they're struggling. Right, so it's my first slide with a graph on it. Please enjoy the pie chart. I worked on that. What did I find? As I said at the start, 27 respondents and 9 are currently employed. 18 or 2/3 of my respondents are unemployed, although some are undertaking voluntary work. But this is this is about paid employment. Voluntary work gets you experience, but we need money to pay the bills. And as we can see here on my slide, we have a breakdown of the sort of employment people are in. So of the 9 people who were in employment, 5 of them had part-time or flexible employment, and 4 had full-time employment. So we're not, it's not fantastic, but it is marginal. It's about the same as you would expect on a national scale. 14.8 compared to the quoted 15%. It's close enough. But overall, it's not fantastic. So I've decided to, I thought I'd look at how the results broke down by gender. As we know, often women give up work, or they work part-time because they've got to care, because they do the unpaid work of childcare and caring for older relatives. And it was interesting to see how the different expectations of people would affect employment for the autistic population. I mean, we're as subject to social convention as everybody else. And do we, I'm going to put this, are we more likely to buck the trend and say, actually, no, I want to work and I'm going to work and not have kids and I don't care what everybody else thinks? Or is that a thing that we don't realise, so we do it anyway? I think at some point when, you know, things go back to being not plague times, I might start a load of interviews of people of different age and when they got the diagnosis, and see what sort of outcomes people had, and how they approached employment depending on when they got their diagnosis. But right, to the men. Of those that responded, there were 16 men, and only 6 of the men were in employment, but half of them were in self-employment and half of them were, half of them was full-time and half of them were part-time. So that's 3 of each. So of my 4 people who were in full-time employment, 3 of them were men, and of the 5 people who were in part-time employment again, 3 of them are men. Right, so that's 6 out of the 16 men who responded were in employment of some form. Another 6 were unemployed and not looking for employment, either because they had worked and then become too ill and had decided not to seek employment for the time being, or because they had always been too ill, or the disability had always prevented them from working at all. And that's spread across every age group that I had. I had no one over the age of 65 respond, which is a shame because I would have liked to have found out more about their experiences. Again, I may be badgering people at some future date for interviews. But what I really wanted to focus on was this interesting group here, the 26 to 35-year-olds who were unemployed and looking for work. Most of them have finished their education and weren't looking to go any further with their education, but they couldn't find work. They have experience, they have enthusiasm and talent, and yet can't get a job. Why are these people who are at the beginning of their careers being ignored? Why are they being wasted? Right, on to the women. Right, 72.7% of the women who responded were unemployed. 11 women responded. 1's employed full-time, 2 are employed part-time, 2 are employed but looking, and the other 6 are unemployed but not looking. Most of them it was medical, although we had one person who was quarantining for COVID-19. So they put themselves down as not employed but not looking. I think it was. I think we can put them all under medical, to be honest. As we can see in the graph here, older women, unlike older men, are less likely to be in work or seeking work. The reasons for this are often medical. Some have worked but found employers unwilling to make reasonable accommodations as they've got older and medical conditions have got worse or have appeared. Younger women, medical reasons apply again, but there is a feeling of despondency in the responses, a lack of suitable employment that can work with being autistic and having other conditions that make people feel like there's just no point in applying because people don't understand them, and what's the point? They can get by on their benefits, so why bother? Because no one's going to employ them anyway. And to be honest, if I hadn't got this job, I would have been among that group. And if we lose our funding next year, I will be back among that group. For those in employment at all ages, 2/3 are self-employed, whether because of childcare responsibility or because part-time is what works for the respondent. Only 1 woman is working full-time. They are fairly young, and I hope they don't get burnt out as I did at their age and working full-time. I hope they found their niche, because finding your niche young seems to be the key to not getting burnt out. And you know, it's nice knowing what you want to do with your life. They do report having had many jobs, and they also found that employers could be difficult without them being autistic, but they're doing okay in the job they've got now, so I'm chuffed for them. Overall, a greater percentage of women compared to men were unemployed, and men also had a greater variety in the hours they work and whether they were employed or self-employed. Basically, men seem to have more options than women. Right, we moved on to slides. The slide 8. So I've got the barriers to employment and staying in jobs. It's fairly comprehensive for the reasons people gave, or I paraphrased because some of those replies were quite long. Basically, most of the personal reasons can be summed up to medical stuff. I can't really do anything about that. Sorry. I can't magic a cure for ME or epilepsy out of thin air. Confidence is a skill we can work on, and coping anxiety mechanisms for anxiety can be learned, I hope. Personally, I use meds for that. But some of our groups at the Kick will help, I hope, people build their confidence and deal with anxiety. A lot of people just put my autism for why they couldn't work. So I don't know whether people feel like just being autistic is a barrier. Is like there's no point even trying because you're autistic, whereas I think, well, give it a go anyway. but I mean, it depends on how. I think that's a personal background thing. There are some things that we can't change, obviously. I would love to make everybody accepting and friendly and believe that everybody has a chance and ability. Unfortunately, I can't do that because I'm not a magician. We can deal with some of the external barriers. As you can see, most of them are about the attitudes of other people that we might be able to do something about in providing training and awareness. As Jane has already spoken about, we can provide Autism Champions training at workplaces. The Autism Mentors and the Autism Champions trained support workers at the service can help and have helped job people in different people improve their conditions at work and in making reasonable adjustments. We've also found one thing that was quite interesting, purely from A, a personal perspective, not going to explain why, and B, because it seems to be a gatekeeping position. It would definitely help if job centre staff were more understanding. There seems to be a lack of training. One of the respondents put it like this: it's hit and miss. Sometimes you get a work coach who understands, tries to help, but most of the time you don't. 25 of the 27 respondents answered questions about the job centre. 13 of those 25 said they found the staff unhelpful and lacking in knowledge, while 8 said they were sometimes helpful, and only 4 found the job centre staff were helpful. And there was also a few comments about just going to the job centre was hard because it's bright, it's loud, it's terrifying. You're going to get grilled. You're probably going to be criticised for something you can't help. And there was some people complained about just being told to apply for anything, sort of that vaguely matched their experience and history, even though it would be completely unsuitable. And the people have explained, no, I can't do this because of this reason, and they're still told to apply anyway, which, yeah, we should probably do something about that. I wonder if the job centre has let us come in and train them. That could be interesting. Many of the respondents are now unemployed, but were once in work, found that they were bullied by colleagues and management, and that reasonable accommodations were refused or only half-heartedly attempted. And people would ask for accommodation, simple things like, can I put earplugs in because the fridge is loud, or because the music's too loud? And they would be told, no, you clearly can't cope, which seems rather unfair. For a lot of autistic people, it is hard to enjoy a job that doesn't provide any joy. Bores, or if they have highly specialised interests and it doesn't fit those interests. Interesting thing, I spent six years working in a factory doing various jobs. At one point, I was working in the sensory kitchen. I got to eat far too much fish, and I put on a stone in 3 months. But there was quite a bit of downtime when I was cooking things between the rush of cooking and getting stuff out, and I used to spend it writing, and I occasionally got into trouble because I was far more interested in writing than I was in doing my job. I could do my job, but it didn't interest me. If it doesn't interest me, I'm not going to do it. It's really frustrating. when you're in that situation, and people make assumptions about why you're doing the things you're doing. And I would be accused of listening into conversations when, in fact, I was just in my kitchen doing my job, and I could just, everybody was really loud. I could hear them. So I'm not deliberately listening to you. You just all speak too loudly. And it's just a thing that happens because my hearing is quite acute. But it causes trouble if people don't know and they're not interested in learning. There's also assumptions about what we're really good at. So people might assume that, oh, you're autistic. Oh, well, we'll put you on this job. It's just repetitive. It's really simple. It won't. Well, actually, this repetitive, simple job is boring you out of your mind. Or, oh, well, could you do the computers then? I know nothing about computers. Or I know very little about computers. But if you know nothing about computers, the assumption that, oh, you're autistic, you must know loads about computers because of the stereotype that we're all computer geeks is really quite insulting. And there's also the problem that if it's actually really hard to find jobs around here. If you are, I mean, even if you're into computers, it's hard to find a job. But if you're creative, or you, in my case, really, really, really like books, there's next to no jobs. For that, we have to find our own work. But I should get back to the survey instead of talking about things like that. Many of the younger respondents, those under 30, have never worked, either for medical reasons or they simply couldn't find employment in the area that matched their interests and qualifications. We're talking about highly qualified people who have experience in voluntary and personal capacities who's never had a paying job purely because the work isn't available. The exhibition Lucy and I are arranging for next year must help us show off the creative talents. Hopefully, while it like as we've said, the first iteration of it will be purely digital. We are definitely looking to find a physical space. We had tried to arrange something with Grimsby Institute, but yeah, plague. There's surprise. Right. COVID-19 hasn't really affected the local autistic population in terms of employment, because we aren't in work anyway. Most of us just aren't working anyway, and those who are doing stuff that's from home, so we're fairly safe. But so what we're going to do, these delightful barriers, the kick is here for autistic people. Actually, everybody's told you about what we're here to, what we can do, but there's a screen with everything on. I would just like to say, employers, get over yourselves. Give us a chance. We're here. We're willing. Give us a chance to do what we can do, and let us do it. Hang on, that's gone back. Why have I gone back? Here we go. Right. So, as I've already mentioned, the other projects I'm working on at the minute, the Spectrum Online, that is mostly just me. I set up the form, and I'm just monitoring and forwarding requests, and the interest groups is something I'm still monitoring. And as I said, email one of us and we'll send you a link. Thank you. Sorry for the rambling. Any questions?